Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Enhance Your World show. I'm one of your hosts, Chris Alba. I believe that Larkin will not be joining us today for this conversation, but I'm grateful to be here, and I think it's going to be a great chat. Something that's been percolating within my life, within my conscious awareness now is trust and how to develop trust, how to maintain trust, how to repair trust. Because what I've discovered for myself is it's easy for me to be loving. This might be Larkin right here. Excuse me one second. Um, so, anyway, so what I've been realizing in my life, in my own in my own circumstances and situation is it's very easy for me to love an individual for who they are, the possibilities of who they could become, and including myself. Sometimes um, I can be a little tough on myself and on others because of those expectations or because of those standards that I hold myself to if I'm not living up to them. And so I've been asking myself and going through the the journaling and those types of things of what is it that keeps me from maintaining the consistency within myself and within my relationships. And the answer that's coming to me has been a really challenging one because it's trust. And if I look back into my history, I can tell you that it was easy for me to accept where we were moving together and trust that everything was going to work itself out, and we were going to do the steps, and we were going to do the work, and we were going to get the things accomplished that we had set out to do. Um, and that hasn't always been the case. And when I look back into it, and it was like, well, what happened? And it was like, oh, well, I lost trust. I lost trust in the individual. I lost trust in myself. I lost trust in our communications. And, and that really appeared in consistency. I know it's easy for us sometimes to overpromise and underdeliver, and or the vice versa of holding yourself to a certain standard to meet this expectation. And you go, and you're super consistent. And you feel super confident with it, and things aren't showing up the way you expected them to. So we get, at least I'm speaking for myself, um, get to that point where we're like, well, maybe I should surrender this. Maybe I should let this go. Maybe I should just continue to pretend that it doesn't exist and not acknowledge it and see if it works itself out, or wait for better circumstances, or wait for something, whatever it is. It's separating myself from the reality of what's showing up, and that tells me that I'm not trusting in that moment. That I'm maybe my faith is greater than um, that everything's gonna turn out the way it's meant to, because I have trust in a greater power, a greater outcome. That no matter what happens, we're always growing through this lifetime, and it's cost a lot of it's caused, I should say, a lot of pain, suffering within those that I love, and those and myself. So the question that I have for the audience today is, uh, how do you trust? Do you trust openly, or are you guarded? If things aren't showing up the way you expect them to, or the way you want them to, do you have trust in the relationships that you have with yourself, that you have with others, that you have in the universe, that things are going to work out? Or do you believe that um, it's someone else's fault, or someone else has some blame or some responsibility? Because I mean, that's the truth, right? Like when we're in a relationship with other people, it's not just dependent on one person. One person cannot maintain a harmonious relationship, because it's a duality. It's self and other, right? And the only way we can strengthen and repair that trust is to be vulnerable, to be open, to share our thoughts, our feelings, our insecurities, the things that we appreciate one another, and share the things that are a concern to us, so we can come together um, in a more consistent way. You know, if someone tells you, hey, I'm going to do this, 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 and they don't do it, do you end up trusting that they're not going to do it? Or do you trust that maybe one day they will? Or how about ourselves? You know, I'm going to quit that habit. I'm going to quit smoking cigarettes. I'm going to quit drinking. I'm going to quit hanging out with those people that distract me, that keep me away from my goals, that aren't living in the way that I want to be living. I was speaking with my mom the other day, and she had shared with me a conversation she had with my ex-wife, and she said, well, Chris left the relationship because he wanted to live a different lifestyle. And, I look back at that and say, she was absolutely right. I did. I wanted to quit uh, um, being in survival. I wanted to be able to provide both time and money to my family, so I could show up the way that I wanted to, and not exhausted, not feeling like I'm not enough, or I'm not providing enough, or anything like that. And when I look back into my life, that was really the example I got from my parents. Was no matter what they did, they didn't feel like it was enough. They didn't think that it was enough. Um, that one day, one day. Well, when I was growing up, that one day didn't it seem so far away, right? And now that 20 years later, it's interesting to have conversations with my parents now, because their one day is now. They are retired. They had a plan, they stuck with it, they made the sacrifices, they did what they had to do to get to where they wanted to go, and now that they're there, it's not enough. It's an interesting thing, and I've watched my dad, struggle and go through this thing with himself and within our relationships, of not enoughness, not trust, and it goes back to that. I believe if we can trust that life shows up for us, not to us, so we can stop playing victim in our own life. We can stop playing victim in our relationships, and, oh, well, this person told me, and I'm guilty of this. This person said they were going to do this, and this, and they didn't do it. And while I was showing up doing exactly what I said I was going to do, how I was going to go about it, and showing up trying to show up in as consistent as I wanted to be, the scene, the observation of that disconnect led to resentment. And that resentment then led me to not show up the way that I know I'm capable or desire to. to be a loving, open, free spirit, trusting that we're all moving in the direction that's for all higher good, not just myself. And, I watch um, lots of programming and, study a lot of different things. And it's interesting when I'm looking at all these relationship things and they're like, oh, you can only, self, 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 self. And, it's all about you. And, people are going to do what they're going to do, and, you can't control them. And that's absolutely true, but you can show up for yourself. And if you're not getting what you want out of life, if you're not getting the results or the love or the kindness or the compassion or the consistency or the integrity or whatever it is that you're looking for within another, well, that will tell you that you're not truly developed in yourself. That's why we're mirrors for one another. How do we show up for ourselves if we're dependent on someone else showing up for us in a way that we're not showing up for ourselves? We can't share with them through our example of being that consistency matters, that openness matters, that honesty matters, that forgiveness matters, because we all F up. We're human, that's one of the challenging things with mindset, right? Especially super positive mindset that hasn't faced too many adversities is, we're not prepared for what's to come. And sometimes life shows us what they would say in tarot, maybe a tower moment. And life shows up in a way and you're like, wow, dang, I didn't realize that this could happen. And it did. And now I get to learn to accept it. I get to learn to love it. I get the opportunity to gain some awarenesses, some clarity that I didn't have prior. I get all these different benefits. I get all these different gifts that I didn't know I needed. I've shared the story about my house being robbed, and at the time I was partying like a rock star. I was partying with rock stars. I was partying with porn stars. I was living that life that I thought that I wanted to live, which I did because that was why I was living it. If I didn't want to be there, I wouldn't have. And it was a lot of fun, and I made a lot of money, and it was cool to be popular and to have doors open for you and opportunities always presented to you all the time. Because people saw you as a go-getter, or that they could make money with you, or that they were going to have this beautiful relationship with you, and they were going to have these things, these experiences with you. And so they invested their trust, their faith, their love into our being. And maybe we showed up the way we wanted to, maybe we showed up the way we were expected to, and things didn't necessarily work out. I know I've had that happen a lot in my professional life and now in my personal life. And over the last few years, these are new changes for me. These are new lessons for me, because previous to my divorce from my wife of 22 years, like we got together at 17. And we were able to make things work. We were able to work things out, work through things, even when we didn't see eye to eye. And, we wanted to do things differently. I was very headstrong, and I was taught leadership, and and I led by example myself, and sometimes that wasn't pleasant. I wasn't the nicest individual. Sometimes I would get angry and frustrated and lose control of my emotions and say things or do things that later I felt ashamed or guilty that I showed up that way. And these have all been really good lessons for me. These have been really good experiences for me because it got me to this point here right now where I'm having this conversation and looking at it within myself of, okay, how do I develop trust that I'm showing up the best way I know how, that I'm putting the best foot forward, that I'm willing to take the leap of faith, that I'm willing to surrender my comfort and my complacency and my ego for this higher thing, this higher person, this higher situation, this higher relationship, this higher outcome, whatever it is. Because the reason we haven't achieved the things that we want to achieve in life is because we haven't developed the collective consciousness, the relationships with one another to be there. Because if that was the case, there would be no war, there would be no strife, there would be no them versus us. There would be no duality. Let's say, just for an example, Democrats versus Republicans. Now, I'm not a huge political person, but I do know that they're the same entity. I do know that. Maybe they see a little bit differently, and so they can put themselves in a container or in a box to say, well, I'm like this and they're like that because they think like this and I think like that. And that may be helpful for identification purposes. But it's been my experience that people in general are not anything other than human beings. And how we show up for ourselves and how we show up for other people depends on the level of trust that we have, not love. Because love is unconditional. It's not something we do. It's something that we are. And when we've been hurt, when we've been betrayed, when we've been abandoned, when we've been lied to or stolen from, or, any of these things, it makes it really easy to trust in not trusting, to put those walls up, to distance ourselves, to toughen our skin so people can't get to those soft, gooey places that we really want to be in, to feel, to experience, and to share with other people. And when we can open up those vulnerabilities, when we can break those patterns, when we can do all those things, then it happens for us, just like everything else. I love the teaching that the law of attraction, for example, we're always manifesting. Now, our frequency is our consistency of how we think, how we feel, how we act, how we behave. And the more consistent we are in that beingness, the more authentically we show up. And people may or may not see that right away. Maybe, one of the things for me, and this is maybe because of the way I grew up and all that kind of stuff. I'm looking at that for myself, but I always wanted to make people feel better. And I always wanted to, because when I made people feel better, then I felt better. It was a great distraction. And sometimes people misread that as I wanted to be intimate or physical with them. And that could have been the case. That could have not been the case. There was many times in my life, people showed up in my life, in my reality, and they shared how they did want to have those types of relationships with me, and I had no clue. It wasn't even on my radar, and I was just being me. And and then, you know, if we did move into that situation or those experiences, we gain new awareness, we gain new experiences, we gain new attachments, right? New belief systems that we maybe attach to, like, ooh, maybe I have more going on than I realized, you know, whatever. You know, in sacred sexuality, we talk about energetic cords. And so maybe what happens sometimes is when we have a lot of external validation through our relationships in whatever capacity, that creates a false identity that we are more, we are more than we believe we are. And that feels good. But if we're not continuously working on that, if we're not continuously holding that identification or that morality or that line or that boundary or that standard or whatever words you want to use to describe or to communicate these things, because I think they can be interplayed. And I think that's part of what keeps us separated in a lot of things is the way we see things, the way we identify with things, and the way that we allow life to show up for us. You know, when we're used to living a certain standard, for example, and we grow beyond that, right? If we're used to, you know, always struggling, always trying to get to the paycheck, to whatever, and then all of a sudden we come into a situation where we have a little more finances and we can be a little more free. Well, then that really shows up. Then we really show up in a different way than we had before. And, you know, that's what they say, you know, it's money can be a great catalyst for the truth. Because, you know, I've known people that had nothing and they were so grateful. And usually when I have nothing and something shows up for me that was unexpected, it's easy to show gratitude for it, because you're like, oh my God, this is really helpful. Thank you so much. This is so nice. This feels so good. Appreciate it, right? But when you get used to people telling you, oh, you're good looking, or you're this, or you're that, and oh, you're, you know, whatever, then we kind of start to discount it a little bit. We start to go, oh yeah, I know, thanks, you know, and then when we're not used to hearing it anymore, and someone tells us that, it's like, ooh, what are you trying to get over on me? You know, in my previous relationship, you know, I went all in. I opened up the doors to everything, and I was so excited to be where I was, and I was so hopeful, and I was so trusting in myself and her and the universe that it was all going to work out the way we intended it to. And when it didn't, man, that was heartbreaking. And it's taken me some time to develop that trust again, that trust in myself and trust in her and trust in the universe, even though the universe kept showing me signs and continues to show me signs through angel numbers and synchronicities and all the things that they, you know, that we teach to find that alignment within ourselves and what we observe on the outside world. I mean, it was all there. So I was blown away when the things that happened. And so much so that I lost complete control over my emotions. And it really exposed some hidden truths that I hadn't seen for a long time, because I got so trusting in my practices. I was so trusting in my teachings. I was so trusting in myself and what was going on and how I was living, that I didn't expect the unexpected. And when that showed up, it destroyed me. It brought me right back into this egoic death, into this great awakening, but that led to a great awakening. So that was necessary. And what happens from here, I don't know, but I trust in what's next. I trust the people that are showing up. I trust the people that are sharing their heart. I trust the no communication. I trust, all the different things, because that's what's currently going on. Can it show up differently? Absolutely. And that's what hope is, right? That's what faith is all about, is that we don't know what we don't know, and that's okay, because what we've known has gotten us to this point. And how do we grow from here? Well, we have to trust in the unknown, and that's scary, man, especially for the more masculine of us. I'm not even going to say sex, but the more masculine ones, the ones that have been trained to keep it all up here and to use our logic and our reasoning. And okay, that didn't work out. Back to the drawing board. How do we make it work? If I do this, maybe I'll get a better outcome. That's not trust. I mean, I guess it's a level of trust in our ego, in our capability. And that's not a bad thing, because that gets us out of some challenging situations. And a few years ago, and even practicing, now, I tried to the story of the two wolves, right? And it's, which one do you feed? And the one that I've been trying to keep happy and content is the higher one. I've allowed my ego to suffer. And my justification of that at the time was, I can take it. I can make it through this. I might not deserve to be treated that way, or I might not be, maybe I deserve to live a better life, or maybe I deserve to live free of addictions, or, all those things. But if I don't trust that I can get through it, then I'm not going to try. I'm not going to take the risk. So let's trust in the unknown. Let's trust in the universe. Let's trust in God. Let's trust in each other. And when pain happens, it is here to help us. It's here to guide us. It's here to teach us. It's here to strengthen us. It's here to alchemize us. I was watching a program the other day, and they were talking about, how do you live beyond duality? And it's just trust the unity of things. We learn more from our pain than our pleasures sometimes. There's very few times that in my life that I can recall that I look back when things were going really good for me and like, man, this is great. How can I do better? Most of the time I was like, oh, let's just keep this going. This is taking me where I need to go. So let's just keep going. Let's just keep going with this consistency. Let's just keep trusting this. Let's keep meditating. Let's keep journaling. Let's keep showing up on these podcasts. Let's keep meeting new people. Let's keep go. Let's keep it consistent, because consistency builds trust. It builds confidence. Even when things don't work out. One of the things that this guy killed himself, and it breaks my heart, man. And I would sit with his mom while she cried, and and he was a challenging guy. He was a challenging individual. And he had a lot of demons, and I tried to help them out in some business things. I tried to help them out in some other things, help them get jobs and things like that throughout the years. And I was sitting there with his mom one night, and she's crying, and she stops and she just thanks me for being me and to be willing to sit there with her while she was going through this. And I said, absolutely, because all I've ever wanted when I was going through a difficult time was the people that loved me to come and just be with me. And she said, Steve used to think so much of you. And one of the things that he always said was, no matter what showed up in your life, you always found a way through. And, I don't know if I fully absorbed it then, because it still comes up, right? And, I thanked her and I said, wow, that, somebody that took their own life thought that of me. Why couldn't I have shown them that? And then I had to learn that I showed him what I could because he saw what he needed to see. And even though he saw that I showed up and I could get through difficulties and I could go through challenges, and when one door closed, I would find another unlocked one, because that was one of the things that always brought me success in business, was the unwillingness to accept defeat. I trusted that if I put my energy, if I put my time, if I put my energy, if I just did what was needed to do, that it would all work out in the end. And most of the time it did. Now, the problem being was, for me, lack of gratitude, lack of appreciation. Because I just was like, oh, well, it's the next thing. Like, don't get too complacent, don't get too comfortable, because when you do, you die. You get comfortable, you stagnate. When you stagnate, your results stagnate, and when your results stagnate, then it's really hard to keep the momentum. So just keep going. And if you can't see a clear path, can you see the first step? Can you trust in that? Just doing that one thing. Maybe it's just waking up and doing something healthy for yourself, kind to yourself. And sometimes it's just to reach out to somebody. Say, I know we haven't talked for a really long time, but I miss you and I love you. I hope you're doing great. And if our paths cross again, I look forward to it. If not, I wish you the best. Because I want to develop that trust within me and my relationships with other people. Hey, Larkin.
How are you guys? I love this topic. It's so funny that we intuitively were both drawn to this.
Yeah.
Well, please continue.
Oh, I kind of lost my train of thought now.
Oh, no.
It's okay. I trust that it will come back if it needs to, right? But it's, it is. It's like how do we develop trust when things don't show up for us? Well, then are we showing up for it?
Yeah, that's the question.
Because if we're really truly showing up, I mean, then things will work out the way they need to. But if we don't show up for it or ourselves, I mean, and sometimes that is sleeping in, sometimes that is taking a day off, sometimes that is just going to sit out in nature. That might not seem very productive, but to me, that's really helped me develop my trust with what's going on beyond my life.
Yeah, and I think we can take that even deeper. as well. I think that's a really good point. Because I think one of the ways in developing our trust and showing up for ourselves, and I can say this because I've taught manifesting for over 15 years, and I went through 20 years of hell with it beforehand on my own to figure this stuff out. And it's really what a lot of the great manifesting teachers and just teachers in general have taught throughout history. I think everybody on here should ask themselves, what does it mean to trust? It's so interesting, Chris, that you wanted to do this topic, because I really wanted to talk about this in reference to manifesting today. So we were so in sync. And I don't think that that's an accident.
No, not at all. And I trusted to just go on. We hadn't got a chance to talk yet today. So I was just trusting, I don't know if you're going to come on, but I'm going to trust that we're going to put this show on. And if she can, she is.
Well, might have to move this to the evening, guys. I was at the barn until 12:30 a.m. last night.
Oh my goodness.
And I had to come home and do 5 hours worth of work. So my schedule with the animal rescue stuff is exhausting. But here's the thing about the law of attraction, and it's not the only universal law, but let's just use that for example. Let's pretend, let's not even use the idea of the law of attraction. Let's just remember that everything is energy, and what you give out comes back. And if like attracts like, then think about, I'm inviting all of you listening to do this. What does it mean then to trust? What frequency are you giving out in trusting? And when you're doubting and you're worrying and you're not trusting, what frequency are you giving out? That doesn't mean that you get to a red light and the light turns yellow and you decide that you're just going to go because as soon as that light turns green, you're trusting that the other side is going to wait for you to get through the intersection. I don't mean that. But I mean, what is your vibration going into your life each day? Literally. I think people need to learn, and this is one of the things that, I think the coaching can really help with, at least it has with my clients, is to have the support reminding people and pointing out where they're not doing things like trust. This is something that I think is hard for us to do on our own. And when we have the outside support, and this is, I'm not saying this, guys, to sell my coaching. I'm saying this so that you guys understand, there's so much coaching marketing going on that I think is baloney. But yet this is one of the areas where I think that outside support is actually really important, because I find it takes clients depending on how deeply buried they are and what they want to change in their life, a good 2 to 3 years to really start to see transformation. And this is me working with them 2 or 3 times a day, and they see full on out transformations. But again, in our world where it's immediate gratification, they're being sold expensive programs for 8 to 10 weeks. People expect 8 to 10 weeks. Hi, Natalie. There's one of my clients now. Welcome. But realistically, people really have to be invested in themselves. They have to be in for the long haul for themselves. So I think, what you're saying, Chris, is important, and people need to have, I don't like this word, but a realistic idea. What does it mean if you're showing the universe, if you're showing your higher self that you trust everything's working out for you, that you're trusting and having faith in this stuff? Then what do you have to do? You can say that and think it intellectually and tell people, but what do you have to do for it to count? And by count, I mean for it to manifest that way. Because in order to manifest what you desire or something better, there has to be trust there. If you don't believe things are working out for you and you don't trust, then are you on the frequency of the better and higher frequency thing you want? No. So I think what people miss is, what does that really mean when we're saying stepping into the frequency of that which you want to manifest? What does that really mean? That means first, and Natalie can attest to this, that means first, you have to trust first. And when I logged on, Chris, one of the things I heard you saying was, and this is so true, like, and this is the number one thing people say to me, friends and colleagues too, like, well, how can I trust it's going to work out if it hasn't worked out so far? Well, that is one of the biggest games of the ego.
Mm-hmm.
That is one of the biggest games of the mind. And if you think about it, that very question incites the concept of time. The mind, which is synonymous with ego, always keeps you in past and future. That's how it controls you. And when you're in past and future, it can always say to you, well, why would you expect to have anything better now? You had never had it before. How can you expect it to work out now? You never did before. You've always struggled with money. How can you expect not to? Well, it's how can you expect not to if you don't do something different?
Right.
If
How
you're
do you step into
saying
the unknown, right?
yeah, exactly, the unknown. And that's the next place we should go in this conversation. Because guys, if you're basing your if I had a penny for every time I'd said this to my clients over the last 15 years, I would be the richest woman on the planet. How can you expect your future to be anything different if you carry the same belief system, mindset, and then choices and attitude that you had in the past? You have to be able to say, my future can be different than my past.
Right.
That's totally foreign to me now. Just because something didn't work out in the past doesn't mean it won't work out in the future. The deciding factor that makes that become reality is the fact that you, A, believe that, and so then B, you won't make any changes. Natalie says, everything works out for what you believe in. That's right. So if you consciously, in the 5% of your mind you believe one thing, but you subconsciously really believe something else, which is why having outside support in whatever form you want for that from someone that really knows how to do this is important. This is not a sales pitch. Don't use me, use somebody else. This is the truth.
Right.
I mean, I want to be able to say this stuff freely and not have people think it's a sales pitch, because everything's a sales pitch and I'm not pitchy.
Well, it's about sharing, right? Like,
yeah, and it's
marketing is just sharing, but if we're doing it, I know what you're saying, because I struggle within that myself with my business. I don't want to come off as salesy, but I do want to share. And it's hard to find that.
Well, balance. And I think that's how you're dealing with a genuine person. I mean, it's fine to be confident, and I mean, if I don't tell people about what we're doing or how to find, a coach that's a good match or something like that, then I'm not doing them any service, right?
Right.
So just take it with a grain of salt, guys, that, we're not pitchy. And to be quite honest, I don't invite everyone to coach with me. I mean, you guys might be like, oh my God, I want to coach with you. This is great. And I might be like, hey, this isn't a good match.
Right.
Because like for me personally, I'm out for results. So if someone is willing to stick it out the time it really takes for them, that's great. If it's someone that wants a quick fix, I'm really not your gal. Because in reality, that's not going to happen.
Sure. Well, and the reason it hasn't happened for you, us, them yet is because we haven't learned what we need to have that yet. It's like my son wanting $1 million because he thinks that's going to improve his life. And then I ask him, well, what are you going to do with that $1 million? Well, I don't know. Well, then, you haven't done the work yet.
That's the truth. Now, but you you guys have to think too about, it's a constant process.
Right.
So like with some things, it will have happened for you. I mean, I have created so many successes in my life consciously manifesting. And that's why I coach it. But does it ever end? No, we always have something. And we have to repeat that process and learn and perfect what we're doing for the next thing. Because, guys, as soon as you manifest one thing, there's going to be something else.
Right.
Right. But the problem is we're manifesting all the time anyway. So I think, I love how on the topic today, you put in relationship with yourself. So, because that's the most important one. You're with yourself all the time. So while you're focusing on what you might want to create or change or manifest, what's really happening? Like, in other words, I find that my clients get real into the techniques and the steps they're supposed to be taking and the practices and habits they're changing, but they might forget and not notice habits that they still have or things they're doing that might counteract that, right? So if you're practicing these habits every day, but then you still have daily habits that are keeping you where you are, what's going to happen there? Right? So
You just make slower progress.
well, or no progress. I mean, I agree with you. I think the answer is slower progress for sure.
Yeah, because I think we're like as you said, even when we're manifesting, we're growing, right? Like we achieve one thing and we got to grow to the next level, and if we don't, then we plateau. Things get stagnant, and then it's been my example in my life that then I can tend to be self destructive. Because you get that, well, what's it really matter anyway attitude. That didn't work out, then F it,
Right.
And it's and actually the strangest thing for me is when I get to that level of surrender, it's it's in that place that the inspiration, the strength, the whatever ends up showing up that puts me back on the path, right? It's like that total surrender sometimes where you're just like throw your hands up and you're just like I'm done, F it. I'm gonna go do something else because this isn't working for me or the way I was expecting it to. And as soon as I do that, then something shows up to remind me like, oh wait, you're not done yet because you still want this. You still want to keep growing. You still want to achieve things. I mean, that's why I got out of coaching altogether and started just working as a healer because, I've learned that, like you said, people get caught up in the technique and the method, and that's only going to take them so far.
Absolutely.
And then you have to switch things up. And if you're not willing to just show up and allow things to naturally unfold sometimes, then we're missing the gifts from the universe.
Absolutely.
We're staying in our ego, in our identification of what feels comfortable and safe.
Well, I think a good point there that really you just alluded to is partnership. So I guess what we're inviting you guys to do is to take a look at, in a very practical way, take a look at what do you think you're doing versus what are you really doing? What messages are you sending to the universe versus what message do you think you are? Because everything is energy. And you're free, no matter what you think you're doing, no matter what technique you use, your choices and actions in your state of consciousness, which I tell people always to make their priority your state of consciousness, that is what determines these outcomes, guys. That is what determines the outcomes, which is why people think oh, I'm doing this, it's going to get me there. And then they're like, oh, no, it doesn't. I give up. But don't forget that the biggest part of all this is self-awareness. In this process, if you don't make these discoveries as to what you're doing, and Natalie can speak for this, if you don't make these discoveries as to what you're doing, what your intentions really were, where, you maybe really are caught up in the past and need to let go. If you can't distinguish between what your ego is saying or your mind and what your higher self or your spirit guides are saying, like we just had our Meet Your Spirit Guides event on Saturday. It was fabulous.
Awesome.
It sold out. It was perfect. And everybody left with something perfect for their level in meeting their spirit guides. And some of the people were so thrilled because you could see now they had a new level of trust with their spirit guides, which will help them to follow their intuition.
Right.
But it's like, I'm so excited to see, like, the next one is the 24th of February. So if you guys want to join that, you need to get on my psychic medium page or larkinsreadings.com, because I only allow about 12 to 15 people on there. But what does that do? What are we really doing there? We're taking your intuitive self, your spirit team, and we're increasing a level of awareness that helps you increase your level of awareness. Because, guys, awareness is key. I mean, with your relationship with self, others, the universe, manifesting.
Well,
With awareness.
And a lot of and a lot of different teachings, awareness is the same as consciousness.
Well, it is. It's a level of consciousness.
Right. So it's like, what are you aware of? How it worked or how it didn't work, or both.
Right.
What
aspects of yourself are you aware of? Are you aware of your own thoughts? Are you aware of your own behaviors?
Right.
I mean, it's really, self-awareness is really the greatest thing, because if you have self-awareness, then you're going to have a broader awareness of other things going on. You're going to have awareness of a situation, of a relationship. It's all about self-awareness. And the ego will always tell you that you already are self-aware. Your conscious self, your higher self, your soul wisdom is going to say, oh my gosh, there's always more to be aware of. Whereas your ego is going to be like, I'm already aware. I already know.
Right.
So that's huge.
So I have this question, this burning question, because this radiates through me, and it has for a long time. And, I've met some very successful people, and we'd all laugh about this all the time. It's always just enough. Where we're at is always just enough. What we have is just enough, because it's allowing us then to be curious about what's next. And I think, to me, and I personally think that's abundance, right? Knowing that we're never going to have necessarily unlimited time, money, resources, or whatever. It's not meant to be that way in a lot of aspects, because if that was the case, I mean, there's already enough man-made money out there to solve all the world's poverty. It's already there. It's enough. Now, what's lacking is people choosing to do it in a different way, so that there isn't such a gap. And I don't know numbers, but I would think that the most of the more popular majority ruled religions probably have enough in their account that if they wanted to end homelessness or poverty, they could do it.
Well, yeah, you're right. And I just want to throw in there too, like, people are brainwashed enough that they're not helping either. I mean, think about it. Do you choose to take your cat to the vet, or do you choose to go out to that expensive dinner that would have been the vet visit? Do you choose to, you know, donate and help something? Or do you choose to use that little extra bit of money you got on your paycheck to go buy something for yourself? Now, guys, I am not condemning what you do with your money. It's none of my business. I am pointing out in general what, for the sake of the economy, because that's what we're all brainwashed is the most important thing, which doesn't even exist if our planet's not here and our health isn't here and our well-being isn't here. We are brainwashed to do all of these mentally, emotionally, and physically unhealthy things that is known that we will then have to pay to fix, correct, and heal from. And yet, it's such a habit and a comfort zone, and everyone's doing it, that we continue to do it. And I remember dating someone years ago, and he was an animal person, but I remember we probably dated about 6 months, and he decided he was going to have this big party. We were all excited we were going to have a party, invite all of our friends. He spent like $3,000 on alcohol for that party. And some of you might think that's fine. It made me angry. Because when I realized, and this was a good eye-opening experience for me, when I realized that all these people who I considered good people were, for the sake of entertainment, would spend $3,000 on alcohol so friends could come over and play games and get drunk and party and have a good time. And I was thinking of all of the people or animals that amount of money could have helped. Realizing if he could just pull that out of his pocket and spend that kind of money, wow. What could that have done to serve the life and death desperation of someone in need? And I'm really referring more to animals here than people, guys, but it depends. I mean, with people, you got to be careful, because if you just give them the money, they tend to do other things with it. But, my point is our priorities in society are way off base. And so we can complain about what society and the government and everything's doing all we want. But the truth is, we're a part of that. We have to step out of that current if we don't want to be a part of that. So yeah, there's more than enough money to do the things we need to do, but collective organizations and things are making those same poor choices that we make as individuals. It's like, if you can't afford to take your animal to the vet, don't go to a $200 dinner. Don't. I mean, to me, it doesn't make sense.
Sure.
So you can apply that, guys, to any area of your life. But think about it. Think about what you say your priorities are versus what they really are. Everyone says, oh, my priorities are help the animals, take care of others. Are they really?
Right.
Are they really? Where are you putting your money, your mouth, your time, your energy, your effort? Really?
Right. Well, and money is just another form of currency, right? Which is our energy, which is our conscious awareness of how we're using a physical, tangible, energetic exchange.
Correct. Yeah.
So, I mean, I can remember there was a time when I didn't have money, but I wanted to give back, right? Like, I wanted to do something. So I volunteered. I wasn't paying money, but I was investing my time and my energy into the organization. And it wasn't until I got a little deeper and got on their board of directors and that kind of stuff that, I really started questioning the direction of the nonprofit, which is still around, and they're still helping families that basically their goal was to help at-risk youth. And I was like, oh man, I was one of those guys. I can help here. I need to be here. And one of the things that was coming up for me in our board meetings consistently was, we got to make more money. We got to be seen more. And I'm like, well, what are we doing with what we have right now? Because if we're not properly using what we have, just bringing in more is not going to help. Like that new shiny van that we just bought that's sitting out on the street that gets moved once, maybe twice a week.
Right.
How is that really helping move the progression of the mission to help at-risk youth? Now, are you driving them to school? Are you picking them up from school so they're not being bullied? What are you? How are we using what we have already, so we don't have to make more? And once we get to that place where we're efficient with what we have, then we're not in desperation mode to make more, and more will come. And it was just an interesting thing. Like, they'd get a little bit of money and they're like, okay, now we're going to paint the building. And it's like, how's that helping the mission? Like,
Right.
how is that helping? Like how, and then, my breaking point for me was, they had this big gala at the end of the year where they spent all this money on booze and that, outings and, all these things to bring in donor money. And here is a group of volunteers that aren't financially maybe well off, and you can't go. We couldn't go to the gala unless we bought the $200 ticket. Well, wait, we're volunteering our time, and now you're telling me that I have to pay another $200 to come be a part of an event that I help put together, organize, get all the various different things. We can't show up and actually talk to the donors about what we're doing within the organization. They don't get to meet the people that are helping the kids that they're giving money to.
Right.
It's more important that you have a golf outing. It's more important that you have an open bar than it is to actually be cause driven, rather than, and I don't know the answer. These were just questions that came up for me. And I get it. When people and I know you've been a part of fundraising, and so have I. And when people get a couple of drinks in them, they're a lot looser with their wallet.
Yeah, and when I did the nonprofits I did, we never had any alcohol in any of our stuff. But,
okay.
But at the zoo we did. I mean, when I helped host big things there, those big organizations would, of course, because they have really huge donors. But most of those people come already intending on donating.
Right.
But I think that, for each of us, we have to decide as individuals, eventually, if we were all present, we would really all come to the same conclusions morally. But we have to, again, guys, I don't want this to be too complicated. I want to simplify it back down. That's one of the things I've made a real point to do in my coaching, is to simplify. Because here's the thing. In the end, all of this just comes down to being more aware. In the end, the egoic self is always out for what it wants. You can tell yourself whatever you want, but that's what the ego is after. The ego doesn't even care if you're happy or not. The ego just cares about keeping control. If you are in touch with your conscious self, That means, I mean, and this is why, Chris, I think, you're aware of this. This is why my focus is always on remembering who you are as a soul. Because it's so important to keep yourself in tune with your real self. Because that's the part of you that, in my opinion, is like your life raft. When you're sinking down in the brainwashing of society and ego, that is your life raft. That is the thing that's going to keep you afloat with your consciousness and your soul. And that's not spiritual talk. I'm very practical about my spirituality. This is practical because it's energy. And this is where, when we talk about relationship with self and others in the universe, stay in touch with nature. I keep saying this. I've said this on every broadcast this week, and I'm going to say it again. Religion, society has always tried to pull people away from nature. They pull the masses away from nature by trying to create fear or trying to make nature seem like it's lesser than we are. Put people in a position where they feel like, oh, they don't, animals don't have souls. Nature doesn't feel. Nature doesn't speak. This is one of the reasons why they had to eliminate the Native Americans. They had to get them out of the pool of general societal influence because they know better. But why am I even saying this? I'm saying this because, guys, when you are in touch with nature, you are in touch with your soul. You are in touch with your intuition. The quickest way to get someone out of touch with their intuition. Hey, Robin. Let's see. How do you say that? Shalalia. That's pretty. When you guys are not in touch with nature, it's so easy to be yanked away from your soul, from your intuition. And if you want to be able to go back and trust your intuition and double check things with your intuition, it's important to stay in tune with nature. That's what nature does. It keeps us in tune. So I think that's just really important for people,
Right.
Because it's actually a huge part of authentic manifesting. And that's what we want. I think we should talk about authentic manifesting while we're still on here, Chris.
Okay.
Like, what's the difference? So, what do you think? What do you want to share about that?
I mean, to me, authentic manifesting shows up without the ego modalities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's the gifts from the universe, both pleasurable and painful, that allow us to evolve and grow. I think manifesting is everybody wants you to manifest the material stuff, right? Because that keeps us in the societal stew. And like you said, it's nature, right? And it naturally unfolds.
So what do you think is the difference in the manifestations? And guys, this is a really important question. And Chris has been working on this a long time too. So I think it's important that we share this with you. What would you tell people then is the difference in the outcomes between manifesting authentically, which everyone thinks they are,
right?
But again, that's a game of the ego, and manifesting egoically, which is really what our society encourages.
Well, I think it's the effect beyond self.
That's a cool answer. Love that.
I mean, so for me, I might want to manifest a new car or a trip or something along that lines, which would be good for me, right? In whatever aspect, or it'd be something that I'd want at least. So I would think that it would be good.
Right.
But at the same time, the effect on our nature, on other people, maybe that's not so good. You know, I love the fact, you know, over the last few years, you know, they talk about these environmental summits, right? That all these people come together to do, and they all fly in their own private jets. And they're like, if you really cared about the environment, why don't you do a Zoom call? or or you can still have the meeting, but
Right.
it seems like an oxymoron that we all have to fly to this one destination in our private jets, like they're not even sharing jets, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
what is the effect on that? You know, or you know, I just saw the thing about the electric cars in China. That just blew me away. There's acres and acres of cars that are rotting in this field because the government wanted to say that they had the most electric cars, so they gave out money for that, and the companies, of course, took it. They bought the electric cars. They're not using them. They just put them in a field. So what are the resources that were, you know, the cobalt and all the things that took to make that electric car? And at the bottom line, the electric car still depends on coal, because if you can't charge it, then it's not.
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, so I think this is really pertinent for you guys to understand, because again, I'm going to take this back, and I'm sure you guys are tired of hearing this, but I'm going to take this back to the industry of marketing to sell you guys something, and how important it is to distinguish between when is someone really offering you guidance and assistance and support and help, you know, which some I'm going to say coaches, because I'm still referring to myself as a coach. And the reason is because one of the reasons I left the psychology and went into the coaching is because you can't go back. Like, you have to go in psychology, you go back through all of this stuff. You go back through people's history and this and that. In coaching, it doesn't mean you can't do that, but you work on where people are. You can tap on where they were and go over that, but you're really working on, okay, but where do we move forward from now? Where are those tools to move forward now? And there's a lot more freedom to work with people. So I'm just going to summarize and say in general, like, you know, referring to Chris and I as coaches, and if you want me to, or coaches and healers, but I'm careful with the term healers too, because guys, any term can be questionable in my mind. Any term can be questionable. So when people say, you know, healers or coaches or, you know, or psychic mediums or readers, I'm immediately turned off every time.
Right.
Because what that means for me is something entirely different. I just don't know how else to categorize myself so people understand what I'm doing.
Right.
Okay. So, but my point here is that there are some really distinguishing factors when we're talking about authentic manifesting and not. Number one is your manifestation going to last? Everything changes, so nothing's going to last forever. We know that. But the point is that, you know, and keep in mind, guys, I've been studying in this industry for over 20 years, coaching. Okay. And initially I bought into everything. And then I learned how to sell that. The difference was I was really selling authentic transformation, but I was using the tools that the mass coaching industry was using and teaching. And it worked, but that wasn't the way I wanted to do it. Okay. I didn't want it to work. And I made a lot of money doing it, and that's great. But the majority of people that really wanted and needed my help, and I don't mean because they didn't have the kind of money that the other people did. I mean because their hearts were in the right place, and that's why they didn't have the kind of money. I'm not saying money hurts that. It doesn't. Money brings out who you are. But what I'm saying is the people who are really struggling with their stuff, that were willing and committed to themselves to make a transformation. Those are the people that I want to work with, not the people that are out for something.
Right.
And that is, it's sad to say, but that's actually really hard. It's harder to find than you think. I have been, disappointed many times in clients that I invited into my program, not because of their failures or mistakes or anything like that, because of after all the time and work and energy and compensation I gave them or things I gave away to them, their attitude and the way they chose to use that. And so here, this brings us back to authenticity. So the other point of manifesting authentically is, okay, so we have will it last? So if we're learning a tool and technique in 8 to 10 weeks is great, but are you really authentically manifesting? In other words, is that what your ego wants because you've been told that's what you should have? Or is that who and what you really are? And this is pertinent, guys, because you can do what I did, and you can authentically have your heart in the right place and be manifesting. Manifest stuff, manifest the money, manifest the clients, manifest the lifestyle, manifest all of that. I mean, I have literally manifested like everything I'd set out to manifest, I did. I literally became like a manifesting master. It was awesome. But then it was like, oh, but wait a minute. What's really in alignment with me? Ah, shit.
Yeah, it's amazing when you get
time and effort. Yeah.
Yeah, you get what you thought you wanted, and you're like, "Oh, this wasn't it."
Right.
And
Exactly.
that makes it hard to trust again, right? I mean
Well, and see, for me, it doesn't. For me,
Yeah.
it does not, because for me, I don't relate those things.
Okay.
For me, my past does not dictate my future.
Good.
It absolutely does not. And I don't know if it's I think that's always been my attitude, but I don't know if it's because of all the years of studying and coaching this.
Right.
That is not part of my reality now. I do not, my past does not dictate my future whatsoever. And that's where people need to get to.
Right.
But in most cases, with most people who this hasn't been their practice, and they maybe are not, they haven't been authentic meditators. They haven't been working with their spirit guides constantly. That hasn't been their way of life. For most people, with the amount that their mind is influenced by society, yes, that's immediately what would happen. They get scared, they get deterred, and that's ego.
Right.
So the other thing we have to keep in mind, guys, with the authentic manifesting is that there's going to be I don't know how to say this. There's going to be like a downward slide. There'll be a decline. There'll be a harsh realization. And so you pursue this and you think you get what you want. And for some people, sadly, they don't even recognize it. For some people, they just think, okay, now I want the next thing. I'm not satisfied with this anymore. You know what I mean, Chris?
Right.
So for some people, they just say that and they don't even end up knowing, Right. So, like Shalelia says, if our society, had its priorities right, this would be a peaceful world. Well, that's true. But here's the thing. When we say our society, ultimately it's up to us as individuals, because we have the individual and the collective.
Well, we are society.
Yeah. So, she's correct there.
Right.
But then we have to remember, and how many of us are willing to do this? Are you willing then to do what it takes? Are you willing to go through the work like my clients have for the past 2 or 3 years to find out, and this is the hard work, guys, and this is what I find people are not willing to do. This is really why we do not have a peaceful world. We blame governments, we blame religion, we blame all of that. But what are governments and religion? They're made up of individual people. So if each of us as an individual did our part, did the hard inner work, because your outer reality is a reflection of your inner reality. Your individual reality will be a reflection of society. So it's important that we lead and be examples for other people, because each of us that conquers our inner self, our inner ego, each of us who rises above that makes it easier for the next people to do it, because it eases the energy and it raises the consciousness. And so it makes it easier for more and more people to do it. And that's why the Maharishi and others would always say, you know, if you can get like just 1,000 people, you know, or I'm sorry, 100 people to raise their conscious level a certain amount, then you'll be influencing 10,000.
Right. It's like the 100 monkey principle, or, you know, I mean, the examples of people getting together and meditating for a block of time and seeing the effect that it has. The challenge being then is, how do you keep it consistent, right?
Well, right. I mean, you got to make it habits and repetition. And that's true, because as a TM meditator, my family and I would go to near the Edgar Cayce Museum in Virginia, on Virginia Beach. Every year we went there over the summer, and there would always be, we would go to meet up with the Transcendental meditators. And there was always a Sunday morning where at dawn, we would all meet at the beach and we would do our transcendental meditation. And what's so fascinating, I mean, it was just the most amazing feeling. What would happen is it would bring all the dolphins in. So they would come all the way in, they'd swim around your legs. They loved that feeling because it was consciousness. They could feel that.
Right.
They could sense that, and they loved it. And it's finally like, oh my God, we can finally connect with the humans. And they can, and they did. But you know, but I guess my point here, guys, is if we want peace in the world, the hard work is you have to say, okay, then how do I work through the hard stuff, the hard everyday stuff, such as how do I make peace with my spouse? How do I make peace with myself about a certain situation? How do I make peace with my job, my money situation, the neighbor down the street that I don't get along with, right? Like, we have to be able to make peace within us. And I want to share this, and then I'm going to shut up here, because this is a big picture thing. When you guys are having challenges and obstacles, remember, obstacles are opportunities. Every obstacle you have, every problem you have is to help you grow. You chose it, you gave permission for it, because you have free will. And we have to train ourselves to, instead of going, oh no, not again, we have to train ourselves to at least look at and respect what something is trying to teach us in our life. And lessons are repeated until learned. The Native Americans taught that in their own way, you know, but lessons are repeated until learned. So when we want to move on from things, we have to really look within and say, okay, what is our part? If my world and my experience is a reflection of me and what I need to learn, then what do I need to do? And that, my friends, is why so few people do hard or authentic manifesting. It's hard work. It's not a quick, easy, immediate fix. It takes work. but the payoff is priceless, right? That's what gives you what you really want. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Wonderful. You nailed it. I mean, I don't have anything else to add.
Well, I think giving people a, whether you guys are watching on the rebroadcast or live, giving you guys a call to action is really important here. What does that mean? Like, Chris, what would you tell people then they could go off and do to make the shift to be a more authentic manifester, which my computer tells me is not a word, manifester, but I use it anyway.
Right. I mean, going with the whole theme of trust, it's taking that time to sit with yourself and learn what it means to actually trust yourself. It would be to trust that you did the best you could when in the moment that you had. And if you don't like the way it turned out, what can you learn from it so you can grow from it? And that repeated lesson isn't going to show up again.
I think it's important that everybody, it's important to remind people, because this is something in coaching I have to constantly do.
Mm-hmm.
Everything, guys, everything is habits and repetition. Everything is habits and repetition.
Yeah.
So if you don't trust yourself, guess what? It's a habit. If you do trust yourself, it's a habit. If you don't believe in yourself, that's a habit. So your thoughts, your beliefs, and if you guys were clients right now, I'd say take notes, because you guys can listen to us, but most of this you're not going to even remember. You're going to just take a part of it away, and it's going to be blotchy, which is again why getting in some sort of a mastermind or group or finding a coach, someone with outside support is important, guys. Again, I'm not selling myself. Find whoever you want, but the outside support matters, because if you don't have that to refer back to and be accountable for, it's so easy to fall back. In my spirit groups, I tell people, you're still human. You're human right now. You're in human form right now. And what that means is that it's habits and repetition, because you have a brain and you have a mind. So neurologically and mentally, cognitively, all of these things are habits and repetition. And so you have to step up to that area of things and be able to make the shifts. And that is the hard work. That's what that is. It's the hard work that you have to do.
So what do you think the takeaway is?
So, I think the takeaway is going to be whatever people are ready for right here and now.
Yeah, or the call to action.
For everyone. The call to action, I think the call to action is, when you get off of here today, do some internal self-evaluation and be radically honest with yourself. How aware are you really? Are you really aware? And you're going to say, yes, I'm aware of myself. What is it? And here's a great way to answer this question for yourself. What is a habit you are or are not doing that is created the reality you have, or the habit that you've had and keeping you where you are?
Great one.
Right. And guys, that can be as simple as, I tell little white lies, or I'm honest about it. I mean, I'm not saying me, this isn't one of mine, but I'm saying somebody could be like, yeah, I say I want to lose weight, but the truth is I use the excuse of not having enough time to eat whatever I want. Right.
Right.
So it starts with being radically honest.
Right. Well, I think that's key for most things, right? Like, and it's not fun. True awareness is not necessarily feel goods.
I think when you get, I think being honest with yourself and I think becoming aware of things can be not fun, but actual awareness, which is what you are, is the best.
Right.
So yes, I think you're right. I think that, you guys just look, the bottom line is, unless you choose to make the shifts, nothing's going to change. No one's going to come save you but you. And everyone, oh, I love Mel Robbins because she says that. Well, it's the truth. Nothing is going to change unless you change it. And that means you're going to have to get out of your comfort zone. You're going to have to do some things you don't want in life. You're going to have to make change, and nobody likes change. But unless we step up and we create change, we don't get different results. And instead, what people are doing is hopping from, program to program, book to book, teacher to teacher, really under the guise of creating transformation. But what they're really doing is they're putting it off.
Right. Or a new relationship or a new job or new whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. New whatever, so that you can, avoid making the changes that you don't want to make, because to your ego, it feels like you're making the shifts that are going to help you. Well, guess what? You're not. And, if you don't get down to the nitty gritty and get some of the hard work taken care of and under your belt, you're just going to stay in the same cycle. You have to actually get down and do the hard work for yourself. It does and will pay off. That's a whole nother conversation. But I think I would get off of here today, guys, and make that choice. Make that radical honesty choice and see where you lie with that. See where you are with that. That's my suggestion.
Perfect.
All right, Chris, anything else?
No, I gotta get going up to Delaware, Ohio. So I gotta be going.
Oh my God, you gotta drive. Bless your heart. All right, Chris. Well, have a good one. Great broadcast. Thank you all for coming. Don't forget to like our channel. We're gonna be doing more this year, and we'll see you all later.
Thank you so much, Larkin. I always appreciate you and the opportunity to have these conversations with you, and looking forward to expanding my growth, right? Because I grow with this, so I appreciate it.
I do too. Absolutely, guys. Well, Chris and I are growing too.
Yeah. No one can escape growth. It's a natural law. So
yeah, that's the truth, isn't it?
Yeah. So everything's growing. But much love and gratitude, and we'll check in next week.
See you later, guys. Bye-bye.